stay away from it, because failure in school means bad GPA overall, or it worsens your GPA at the very least, which is what many students pay attention to when it comes to college. We're pressured to not fail, and in my adult life, I am maybe even more thankful for all of my failures, because some of the absolute best lessons I've learned in life have been through failure. So much now that I make it a point to find new things to try without even fearing failure at all, because I know very well that even if I do fail, all that it means to me is that I was brave enough to try something new, and since it didn't work out, I'm free to discard it and try something else and move on. The same principle actually translates to the gym. Your muscles will not grow until you manage to tear them, and that process in itself is physically painful, and it can last for a couple days. It's a good kind of pain though. But the point of it all is behavior change is a skill, and it's systematic. You can get better at it if you practice in the right way. Don't hold on to your mistakes or the what ifs. Look forward always and in a positive manner. Most importantly, look at the progress without worrying about the results. The work will give you the results, guaranteed. Alright, so as we work on changing or adjusting certain behaviors we're not happy with, this last part is about one simple yet incredibly powerful ingredient that, if you add it to your current process, can have a huge positive impact on your results, and that is compassion. I'll begin explaining the huge impact of this tiny ingredient from neurosurgeon and neurologist James Doty's view on how to hack your brain for happiness. So our DNA has not changed in the last 200,000 years. The world around us, however, so technology, medicine, science has evolved faster than our DNA. All of that has changed a lot faster than what we're made of. So Doty explains that as a result, we have evolutionary baggage which stands in our way sometimes of us being happy. The sad thing, he says, is that we also have a healthcare system that is not oriented towards wellness, but it is oriented towards illness. What happens to that group of people, or more accurately, and currently 20% of the U.S. population and over 50% if we include alcohol abuse, who feel anxious, stressed, depressed, or alone? They are prescribed pharmaceutical drugs. And what have we gotten from that? According to Doty, we have fundamentally not solved the problem. Why? Because as a species, he says, to have something like theory of mind, complex language, and abstract thinking is what makes us different from other species. And unlike other species, our offspring require us to care for them for a decade or 2 decades. The attribute that makes us want to spend those resources and energy to raise our young is because we are hardwired to care. We are hardwired to recognize the suffering of another, especially of our offspring, and alleviate that suffering. The problem is, although that's our default mode, we have this, again, evolutionary baggage that oftentimes interferes with us being our true selves and making connections. The baggage is related to a primitive part of our nervous system, so we know it as the fight, flight, or freeze response. So we have 2 main divisions in our autonomic nervous systems. This fight, flight, or freeze response is controlled by the sympathetic system, and our calm, caring, focused nervous system is controlled by the parasympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system. When a person is anxious or put in a place where their environment exceeds his ability to process, our autonomic nervous system kicks us from our calm, caring, nurtured, focused self and kicks in this fight or flee system, or our sympathetic nervous system, and what happens? You get afraid, your heart rate increases, your blood pressure increases, your immune system is depressed, and hormones associated with stress are released, and released often on a chronic basis. So, the reason I'm telling you this is because this system worked well in the primitive times, because if a large animal were to have been chasing you, the system would kick in immediately, causing you to get up and run to the nearest tree and climb it. Today, however, the effect of that response triggers anxiety, depression, isolation, less communication, less creativity, and less productivity. So then what's the solution? Obviously, today it's clear that the solution has not been science or technology. In Dottie's words, we spend the most on healthcare and have the most sophisticated technology in the world, yet we have this epidemic of stress, anxiety, and depression. We have the highest cost of healthcare, the most dissatisfied patients in the world, and we fall in the lowest quadrant of any industrialized country in terms of efficacy and cost effectiveness. So trying to understand this system instead of continuing to hijack our brains in this same direction, which is largely automatic based on how humans work and how our brains work, and has a significant effect in long-term mental and physical health as well as lifespan, is to hijack our brains in the other direction. We can actually increase our ability to be compassionate, and when we do so, it has a profound effect on our own health. The Dalai Lama said that being compassionate is one of the only times when it's okay to be selfish. Studies have now shown that when you are compassionate, when you recognize the suffering of another, engage with another, it has a profound effect on your blood pressure, heart rate, boosts your immune system, and decreases stress levels to baseline. And you have a sense of calmness, your decision skill improve, your creativity and productivity also boost, and it also strengthens connections with others. These are only the positive internal effects, but the truth is the biggest impact is how those actions translate into your outwardly life. How do you then switch directions? Well, it's definitely not a pill, but I'll put this in the context of the pharmaceutical industry. So if I told you I had a pill that was organic, readily available ingredients, 0 side effects, and had this profound effect on your physiology where it allowed you to work at your best and allowed you to have a purpose, worry-free mind, content, and happiness, how much would that pill be worth to you? Probably a lot. The thing is, this actually already exists and can be used by most people. But what if I told you that the only requirement after taking this pill is to sit in silence for 15 minutes, breathing in and out, and focus your intent on being compassionate? When you do that, you will realize you no longer need the pill, and that's in fact all it takes. And by doing this and seeing the long-term effects it has on most aspects of your life, when you come to the end of your days, you will have really known what it means to have lived. Mental health is incredibly important to me because myself including and a lot of people that I care about have seen and gone through depression. And not only that, nowadays I see and hear about so many people being depressed, including children, that don't know what to do and maybe even feel insignificant. Again, some of which I absolutely care so much about. This is for anybody that is in a strange and dark place, and trust me, I'm not trying to minimize the effects of depression by saying most people feel this way. I could never do that. The fact of the matter is that depression is incredibly real and affects each of us in different ways. So the problem is not by experiencing depression or bad times, but by shutting ourselves out, thinking nobody cares. I can't even say that me saying these things and you listening will make a difference, because it honestly won't until you find the courage to turn just one little switch, any switch, and begin to open yourself up, even if it's just to a single person. This is another reason why I spent 2 episodes on attention, because if we can't control our attention, we fail to make real and meaningful connections. And that only worsens our chances of being able to trust someone enough to let them in. I know this because this is exactly what happened to me. So I'm ending today's episode with a perfect example of just what I mean. Robin Williams to this day is one of my favorite actors, and even though to most of us he looked happy and cheerful on the outside, clearly This was not the case, and not a soul knew until it was too late. I know there are many people who feel the same way right now, and if you're one of those listening to this, I am so incredibly thankful that you are still here, because I cannot stress enough how important your existence really is. Again, I'll end today's episode with a compilation of some of my favorite quotes from Robin Williams and expressing his views on the world. No matter what anybody tells you, words and ideas can change the world, and the human race is filled with passion. Death is not the enemy, gentlemen. If we're going to fight a disease, we must fight the most terrible diseases of all, indifference. A doctor's mission should not just be to prevent death, but to improve the quality of life. When you treat a disease, it's either win or lose, but when you treat a person, I guarantee you will win no matter what the outcome. If I asked you about art, you'd probably give me facts on every art book ever written. Michelangelo, you may know a lot about him, his life's work, political aspirations, him and the Pope, sexual orientation, the whole works, right? But I bet you can't tell me what it smells like in the Sistine Chapel. You've never actually stood there and looked up at that beautiful ceiling. If I asked you about women, you'd probably give me a syllabus of your personal favorites. You may have even been late a few times. But you can't tell me what it's like to wake up next to a woman and feel truly happy. And if I asked you about love, you'd probably quote me a sonnet. But you've never looked at a woman and have been totally vulnerable. Known someone that could level you with her eyes, feeling like God put an angel on earth just for you. Someone who could rescue you from the depths of hell, and you wouldn't know what it's like to be her angel. To have that love for her, to be there forever through anything, through cancer. You wouldn't know about sitting up in a hospital room for 2 months holding her hand because the doctors could see in your eyes the terms visiting hours don't apply to you. You don't know about real loss because that only occurs when you love something more than you love yourself. I doubt you've ever dared to love anybody that much. And as life goes on and we enter new phases in our lives, we find ourselves trying to remember all the good times and try to forget the bad times. We find ourselves worrying about the future, thinking, what am I going to do? Where will I be in 10 years? But I say to you, hey, look at me. Please don't worry so much, because none of us have very long on this earth. Life is fleeting, and if you're ever distressed, cast your eyes to the summer sky, when the stars are strung across the velvety night, and when a shooting star streaks through the blackness, turning night into day. Make a wish and make your life spectacular. I know I did. Medicine, law, and engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life, but poetry, beauty, love, these are what we stay alive for. You are here and life exists, an identity that the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. What will your verse be?